Hello. Is everybody up? We're live. It didn't surprise me that time. I was ready for it. Welcome to our Monday night Epic Books discussion. I'm here with Richard and Bill. I don't know if we need to keep doing introductions, but just really quick, you guys, if you have anything that you want to add to the quick, you're from BC introduction, please do so. Richard or Bill?
I'm still employed by BC after these 2 weeks, so that's a positive thing.
How long you been at BC?
23 years now.
That's
Wow.
insane.
About 2 months over half my life.
I've been there since 2007, so I'm double digits.
Yeah.
But Richard McCrow, Bakersfield College, and retired military.
I can't compete with the military. But here's a fun fact. I have been every type of employee at BC. I've been a classified, I've been a faculty, and I've been an administrator.
And you were a student too, right?
I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. I got my associate's degree in psychology from Bakersfield College. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That explains it.
Way back in the day. Yeah. I thought I was going to be a counselor, and then I realized that I don't like people, so that was a problem. So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad the community college helped you figure out what you did not want to do with your life.
Actually, I didn't figure it out until much later. Sadly, it took some work experience. I went on and finished my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I just went all the way down the wrong road. So but honestly, like I went back to studying education in grad school. There's a lot of psych there, right, with learning theory and some of that stuff. So it wasn't a complete waste.
No,
I don't know. Yeah. Who really knows what they're going to do when they're 17 years old? I mean, come on.
No.
Nobody. That's why community college is here. Or part of it.
I'm glad that we have two people who have very different experiences. So when we get to the conversations about education, you're going to be able to add some pretty good personal experience. Your experiences are so different from mine as well. Today we're going to be talking through chapter 3 of So You Want to Talk About Race? So let's talk about race. And the title of that chapter is What If I Talk About Race Wrong? I think, we can just jump right in because I still, we're only 3 weeks in, and even being in spaces where we're constantly having these conversations and trying to be vulnerable and brave and do all those things to support other people, but also sharing my own experiences. I worry about this all the time. Am I saying the wrong thing? Even this platform, like, is this appropriate? Is it appropriate for me to call these people together and say, well, I read this book. Do you guys want to talk about it? And then I don't know if it's brave or important or whatever to then also put it out for the public viewing, for public consumption. It just seems like the kind of thing that I feel like if I don't put myself out there and make mistakes, then, I'm not kind of standing by my own word, right? I want to learn and grow and be supportive across the board. So, can I maybe get a feel for where you guys stand on this before I throw up the first major topic?
I think the chapter should be called I'm Going to Talk About Race Wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's inevitable. The only way to not talk about race wrong is to never talk about race.
Right.
This question, fear of failure is the enemy of all personal growth, right? So fear of talking about race wrong, if you let that fear win, then you're never going to get any better. I mean, you have to humble yourself and put yourself out there. And I'm not saying that whatever you say about race is the right thing, because you're probably going to get it wrong. And the odds of you getting it wrong go up in relation to how male you are and how white you are. It's like, it increases. So I'm definitely going to get it wrong, like, all the time. So, statistically speaking, if the more you talk about race, the more you're going to get it wrong. But hopefully it's something you learn from, and hopefully you approach it with a whole lot of humility, because I mean, that's the embarrassing thing, is the more I learn about racial issues and about systemic racism, the more embarrassed I am about who I was a year ago or 6 months ago, or sometimes even last week. I mean, it's, if you're honest with yourself, you're going to see a lot of times where you said something really embarrassing and really stupid. And, I shudder to think what some of the people of color in my life have had to listen to come out of my mouth, out of my white stupidity. I'm going to write a book called White Stupidity, because that seems to be the thing that I'm an expert on, right? We have white fragility, but nobody's written white stupidity yet. But we're going to talk about race wrong, and that's okay. It's not ideal, but I'm a firm believer that if you listen more than you talk, maybe, and and you listen to the criticisms of the things that you say, and if you ask a lot of questions and stop talking about yourself, maybe you'll start to talk about it less wrongly. I guess that's not a word, but I'm just going to make it up. Maybe you'll learn to talk about it a little bit better. And on that note, I'll talk less now and let Richard talk.
I think too is and she talks about it in the book a little bit, is, it is quite comfortable not to talk about race and to sit back and just say, nah, I don't think I'm going to enter that conversation. But she hits it in the book. She starts talking about, well, then you accept those things that happen to people of color. And so where it really hits home is when you're talking about my niece, my nephew, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, and my family. When you start talking about just accepting that their life has been a struggle, and I'm not going to talk about it because I might get it wrong. I think that's where I'm at, is I have to talk about it. I am not comfortable at all. I am way outside my comfort zone every time I talk about it. But the truth is, if I focus on the people that are affected by racism, then I have to talk about it.
Okay. Now, given, especially Bill, when you were talking about stupidity, your word, not mine. I think maybe we can talk about this quote, because she goes into detail of a conversation that Oluo does about a conversation she had with her mom. And this is what her mom said in response to the joke that, she wanted to share because she felt like she could. But then I realized he's probably gone through so much racism in his life, he doesn't know who the good white people are. And I just want to, just for a second, imagine, because this is her mom who is white. So as a white person, just think about, and last week we kind of talked about what is a moment where maybe these words ran through your head or came out of your mouth, where it was like, well, I can relate, so I just need to educate this person of color about why I'm an okay person to say these words and have this experience with you. I can share this experience with you. I can't imagine things. People have said similar things like this to me, but I can't imagine being her and hearing this from her mother, or doing the work that she's done, have the conversations that she's had with her mom, and then have her mom say something like this.
I'm mortified by this quote every time I read it. I'm just like,
mortifying. It is.
And I want so badly to be a good white person. I really do. I want to be one of the good ones. but like that whole idea is like, oh, that's exactly the problem. It's just like, yeah. Go ahead, Richard. I don't have anything intelligent to say here.
I was just going to say, she follows up this quote where her mom, and I wrote it down, was, and if I were Black, I would probably be angry all the time. And and just the daughter just thinking, oh yeah, there you go. Just thinking,
Yeah, that was next.
No, you don't go back, and then saying, I have to have this conversation with my mom. And I couldn't help myself, but my sister Sally, both of her daughters are Black, and my vision of her mom is my sister Sally, who's a wonderful, wonderful person. But just that process of, you want so bad to help your daughter and talk with your daughter, and then you live in a life where you think that there's a special privilege in the fact that you have daughters that are Black, that sort of, to me, adds to that white privilege, that you have this feeling like, oh yeah, I'm not white. I'm not
like, I'm an insider. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I know. I relate strongly to the mom in this case, because I have Black kids myself, and they're not my biological kids, but this situation is very convicting, because you, as a white guy with kids of not just Black, but a lot of different colors, honestly, I feel like, man, I've got a handle on this stuff. I braided my daughter's hair last week. I deserve a freaking Medal of Honor for that. Not just because I'm white, but because I'm a white dad. I'm like the elite special forces of, but it's just so convicting, because like that quote just sort of brings my ego like all the way down, because it's so easy being somebody of privilege to say, oh, I'm one of the good ones. But guess what? There's a whole lot of people out there who think that, and are just as far off the mark as I am when I think it.
Yeah.
And it's very humbling, and it's very humbling, this book in particular, and her writing in particular, because she's biracial and because she has a white mom, like, is so convicting in so many ways to me, because I'm a white parent of kids of color. Yeah, I got nothing. I mean, it literally leaves me just, I should just shut up now, because I have nothing to offer this.
Oh, go ahead.
This statement, I think, is probably. I'm going to bring our guest on right now, because this statement, to me, it even bothers me more than the previous one, because there's a lot of layers here when it comes to, if I were Black, if I were a person of color, but specifically in this case, if I were Black, I'd probably be really angry all the time too. So that sentence, that I would probably be really angry all the time too, is what's really wrong with like that whole page in that book. So I'm going to bring Kanuli in. Okay. Welcome to the stream.
Hi, good evening. So glad to be here. Awesome.
I'm going to put your name up real quick. This is Kanuli Martin, and she is the program administrator / manager at the Delano office of the Henrietta Weil Memorial Child Guidance Clinic.
Yes.
And I saw you were taking some notes. Do you want to say a little bit about maybe what you do before you jump in, or are you ready to just? I got some things to say.
Well, I was inspired. You guys were talking. I'm like, oh, that's a great point. I'm a therapist, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I work at Child Guidance Clinic in Delano as a manager there at that site. But I, just being a person of color, let me just first salute you and commend you for taking on a very difficult, controversial topic such as racism. And I think it's important to highlight that, BIPOC people need allies, and, BIPOC people can't conquer the race question the race issue without allies or people that aren't, BIPOC. And so I think it's amazing that you're even interested as a group to read the book and talk about the book and talk about such a difficult topic. And I agree with you, Dr. Moseley, Bill. It should be called "I'm going to talk about race wrong" because because it's such an inflammatory subject, and we have a history of a lot of pain. It's landmines all around. You're going to always say the wrong thing. The heart could be in the right place, good intentions. That's, what I remember the book saying, reading about that. But people in a wounded state sometimes can take offense when someone is being, when someone has the good intentions, but may say the wrong thing. So it's just a difficult topic. And I think a lot of people are still in pain about racism and what racism has done to our culture, our American culture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that you're able to spend the time with us because we need many voices. And, sometimes as we stumble through this, it's good in our allyship not to feel like we know so much because we read a book, and be grounded, but also, to feel that we're actually being supportive and being in the right place at the right time, maybe sometimes, and acknowledging when we're not. And excusing ourselves when we're not. Okay, let me put this back up because I have like visceral reactions to this because I've been treated, I'm not Black, but I have been treated as, the angry Latina, or, people have said to me that they can tell I have an accent when I get mad, stuff like that. So this idea of being angry all the time because of racism,
right?
Like people just can't deal, or that it's always right here on the surface. And it's like, maybe it is, but that doesn't, this comment just, anyway.
Well, I think one thing about the comment is the whole, number one, we should all be angry about something so painful. It's, of course, as a BIPOC person, it's impacted me. It's not just impacted African-American, Black, Indigenous, people of color. It has impacted every cultural group because, people sometimes feel blamed. I mean, it's, racism has impacted our entire culture. So we should all be angry about that. But then what is also being said, it speaks to, BIPOC people, particularly African-Americans, being angry all the time. There's just that stereotype, angry Black man, angry, Black woman, and all of that. And so it is a loaded statement that has a lot of meanings and could be very offensive for some. Absolutely.
Yeah. We're going to run out of time no matter what, because there's so much to talk about, but this idea of, she's biracial. So she has that dual sort of identity. And when her mom asks her about, how she's identifying, after they have the conversation about the joke, this here, when she explains to her mom, because of the way she looks, right? Race doesn't care who your parents are, right? It doesn't matter who my parents are, what they've accomplished. It doesn't matter what I've accomplished or what my name is. It's all of this is built on the way I look. And I don't know, Bill, if you want to maybe talk a little bit about it specifically, because you said you're raising children that don't look like you. So this has to be something that's on your mind all the time.
Only 2 of mine have the burden to bear of looking like me. 2 of 7, so the others are much better looking. Don't tell my white kids I said that. Honestly, it's true. I mean, it doesn't it doesn't matter who your parents are. If you look a certain way and you walk into a convenience store, you're going to get followed around. It doesn't matter if you are, if you have a 210 IQ or you're a rocket scientist. If you have brown skin or kinky hair, you're going to get followed around. You will be discriminated, because that's race is a visual, is a visually driven construct that we use to put other people in a place that's less advantageous, so that we can have the advantage. And I can say we, because I'm literally the we we're talking about here is white dudes, right? So, speaking on behalf of white men, I mean, racism it's a means of classification so that we can distribute everything unevenly. And it does not matter what your parents look like. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your parents do. It doesn't matter if your dad's the dean of Bakersfield College or one of the deans at Bakersfield College. If you walk into the convenience store across the street, you'll be followed around, because that's the assumption, right? That we make. I understand how loaded the stereotype is of the angry Black person, but the more I dig into this, the more I feel angry on behalf of my kids, because I feel the discrimination against them. I feel the cards stacked against them. And like I said last week, my kids inherit a lot of my privilege just by virtue of the fact that they have a white dad. So they have some opportunities that other kids of color do not have. But even the little bit that they have to deal with, I have the anger. And, I'm not sure what to do with it. So here I am talking about it with you all and trying to figure it out, and talking about race wrong all the time. Because somebody's got to be willing to make that mistake, and Richard and I are willing to be out here talking about most things wrong, but especially race, I guess.
Yeah.
Richard, do you have any experience? I know that, even your own kids, I don't know if they've had any experience. If you want to talk a little bit about, raising your own kids, any experience that you've had with that. I'm calling you out, not putting you on the spot.
Well, because my kids are lighter, they're half Filipino. I don't know. That's the crazy part of it, is I've never really talked to them about race, and I've never asked questions of, have you ever been followed in the store, or those types of things. It may have happened to them, but I don't think so. They've never brought it up. I do think about, when I'm listening to Bill, I think of, though, that had my children experience that and I witnessed it, I could feel the rage. And then your white side kicks in, like, I'm not going to tolerate this. Let me deal with, I feel like I would have that kind of rage where I would, and then suddenly it's like, I'm yelling at a clerk, I'm demanding justice, in the middle of the store. And meanwhile, my kids would be mortified. And so there's a struggle there. I'm not sure how you deal with that.
Maybe we should have your kids on.
We had, my kids would love.
I want to ask your kids
join this show and just tell you all the things, but I'm not going to let them anywhere near this camera. No way. My 19-year-old daughter, who's biracial, looks fairly Black. She's got very curly hair, and she's half Black and half Mexican, and doesn't look anything like me, but dresses well, clean cut kid. I think she looks great. She was taking a walk in our neighborhood where we've lived since she was born, and was just walking and talking, had AirPods in her ears, So clearly, like, you know, has some resources, like doing fine, walking around her neighborhood, minding her own business, talking to a friend on the phone, and a white lady came out of her house and stopped her and said, what are you doing? Like, you know, questioning her right to be in her own neighborhood. You better believe my wife drove by that house every day for the next like 6 weeks, hoping that lady would be outside. So that's how you don't. My wife is the ultimate mama bear, so you don't mess with her kids. But yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, Rich, because there's that side of you that's like, I'm the parent, I'm the protective, I feel the anger, and then but you're also like, you're used to being able to get answers because you have the privilege to like command that from people. And so it's a really weird place. But I think if you direct that sort of like, you use that anger and you use that privilege and you do what you need to do on behalf of your kids or your friends of color or your employees of color or people who are in any way less advantaged. In my case, it's anybody who's not a white guy, honestly. It's women. It's whatever, the disabled. It's economically disadvantaged. But in this case, it's people of color, right? You know, you use that. It's sort of like, okay, I'm angry. What can I do about it? And I can actually do some things. So, and maybe driving past that lady's house wasn't the right answer, but but that's what my wife needed to do to work through it. So that's what we did. She's like, I'm going to drive by and see if she's outside watering her grass because I want to have words about her.
Oh no! Can you imagine? Then she's on Facebook.
Yeah. I can't imagine because that's my life.
It's you know, I'm just thinking that, you know, as a parent, it's really hard. It's happened, you know, where we live and all of that, and it's just important, I think, to my kids are 14 and 12, and when they were little, you know, there've been some things that's happened where we live, where they go to school, and you know, N-words, being someone the same age using N-words, and I think that what's important is to use our power wherever we have power, the power that we have to be able to protect. You know, in my case, it was my son, the you know, young people, poor people. If you have resources, use the gifts, the power that you have to support. And I think that's, you know, that's the best we can do and we can say is protect those that
That's
you know, when we can.
That's a great way to say it. Use power wherever you have power.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, that's it. That's the key right there.
Yeah, and
Okay.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay, no, I'm thinking about what you just said and thinking about the mom, you know, in the book when she was talking about her coworker, and the coworker said, you know, what do you know about being Black?
right.
The mom is so offended. And then I'm listening, and I'm thinking about the challenge, what I was sort of telling Bill, how I felt about listening to him about his kids, thinking of something like that happened to my own kids, what I would do, how I would speak out, how I throw it to the wind, not thinking of the consequences. And then in the discussion in the book, she talks about, well, there are consequences, you know, for people of loss of your job. You're accused of being you know, an angry Black female or an angry Black female. And there's things and issues that come up that I don't understand. I understand true, but I'm also thinking I've never had to experience that. So my anger and rage brings on a whole different thought process of how I kids and do these kinds of things. So Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that other than
Well, you acknowledge that there's privilege even in having the feelings. There's privilege
Yeah.
in just having the emotion and being able to express yourself in a moment of injustice, especially when it's a grave injustice.
Mhm.
And some of us have to kind of check ourselves.
Mhm.
Is it worth it? Right? When is it worth it? I don't know if this is a far cry, but it's on my mind right now because I watched the last two episodes, or the last two recorded episodes of Roots. I've been watching it because I had never seen the whole thing, and HBO Max has it available. So I was watching, and there was a moment where Tom says it's right when the Civil War is over, and oh, we're free, and there's he wants to go into town and complain about the riders that came in and burned down their home. And somebody asks him, like, well, you'll be lynched, you'll be killed, and he says, there's only one way to find out. And so, like, in that moment, before anyone really understood, and maybe they did understand what the consequences were going to be of stepping into that free space, he's like, there's only one way to find out if we're actually free. There's only one way to find out if I can actually speak, my own truth to power, or whatever. Damage has been caused to our family, and how do we know if this is real? So that's a scary moment, and I know that's extreme, considering maybe what we would be talking about, like being followed in a store or confronted at work. Feeling is the same, though. If I don't speak up, then what?
Right. And it's I want to be very careful with my words. Privilege has rightfully been given a bad rap. Like people are born into privilege, and I know this next chapter is check our privilege, but I also think that power and privilege can be used for good. And if someone has the privilege, and if someone has the power, then it's in this training that we had, I was sharing with you guys earlier about the training about racism that we had, and it was providing racially affirming care. Dr. Lisa Martin and Dr. Marquita Wills. It was amazing. But what they were saying was, though we have privilege, they were taught. So in our field, we talk about safe place. As a therapist, we want people, when they're talking, to be able to be in a space with their therapist that they're free to share, that they have a security and peace and sharing. It's a safe place. But what they talked about was brave space, not just a safe space, but brave space. And when you begin to be counterculture or anti-racist, then you are going against the grain, and it does require moving into brave space, because you will have people saying, what do you know about being, oh, you're privileged, you're trying to help it, you're being the great white hope. That's a dilemma there, where you will have people who will counter your efforts in being an ally. And that's a fact. I can say that I can say it, I'll say it. You will have sometimes, for example, Chelsea Handler is an entertainer, and she had a Netflix special called Hello Privilege, It's Me, Chelsea. And she used her privilege, she used her power to expose racism in our culture, systemic racism and bias, implicit bias. But one of the people were like, it's not enough. What are you doing? You're using your privilege. And that is moving into brave space to say, hey, if there's something you can tell me that will help me grow to be an ally, I want to learn. But it also is not going to push me in a corner and not try to make moves, which is, really what our topic is. What if I talk about race wrong? it's moving bravely. Even if I talk about it wrong, I'm still gonna talk about it.
That's a great example. Thank you so much for remembering that, because I remember in everyone go watch it. I remember her going into is that the space where there were students that were sharing like their experiences, and they were like kind of like, well, who are you?
What are you
like
doing?
Some white lady. Yeah,
Right.
like, why are you? This is our space. Like, you don't get to say. And
Exactly.
it's so I'm gonna put this up here because this maybe will kind of lead that a little bit. She went into like these topics, right? Or these feelings or these thoughts that maybe you have if you're trying to talk yourself out of talking about race because you might be wrong. That defensive feeling, and maybe in that situation, why? You know, what is it that's stopping you from allowing an ally to come into that space? But then on the other side, for people like Bill or Richard or anyone else who wants to go into a space, feels defensive and then backs out. Why is that? And what experiences have you had when it comes to this defensive feeling?
Ego. One word.
Yeah.
It's your ego. And honestly, like that's what keeps us from talking about race in the first place, is we're worried about our ego. What if I'm wrong? What if somebody thinks something bad about me? What if what if I offend somebody? What if I offend a white person? I mean, I can think I have massive guilt about the times when my kids were little, my black daughters, and people would touch their hair and I wouldn't say knock it off or slap their hand away. Let me just tell you, nobody's done that recently, because that person who's worried about offending people is kind of burned out on that. So don't touch my daughter's hair. But I have vivid memories of people touching their hair and thinking, oh, I don't like that. But I didn't say anything because I was a chicken and I was worried about offending them. And I was, it all comes back to ego. Because I want to be the good guy, right? I want to be the good guy. So if I'm talking about race, I want you to tell me how great I am at talking about race. I don't want you to tell me that I did it wrong, because because my fragile ego can't handle that. So it's that ego. I mean, most of these things come down to, like, take your ego, put it to the side, and realize that it's going to get stepped on a little bit, but that's okay. That's it in the whole scheme of things. If we're making progress against systemic racism, having your ego stepped on a little bit is a minor thing, and it's worth it. It's worth it, and 100 times more. It's still worth it. But it does take some getting used to, because I mean, you're a therapist. You know the great lengths that we all go to protect our own ego, right? I mean, that's, if you're talking to Freud, right? That's what our whole life is geared around, protecting our stupid egos.
Mechanisms, for sure.
And I mean, Freud was a little weird, right? But he wasn't too far off on that one.
What I like about this list is sort of what she says about, if you've picked up this book and started reading it, like, you've come to the right place. This is going to be a safe space for you, but these things will still happen, right? You're still, like you're saying, there's still that ego that's involved, and you will get defensive. But I like the way that it's presented as sort of like, it's going to happen. I mean, she even writes it like in all caps, right? I think on one of the pages, you will get this wrong.
You will screw up royally, is what she says.
Like, you have to keep, just like with anything else, it takes practice. It's not a one and done thing. You can't do like a one. I mean, Kanuli, you were talking about doing a training. I'm imagining, I'm going to assume I'm imagining that it's not going to be like, oh, we already did that training, so everyone's an anti-racist. Let's go. We're done. You know, that's going to be a continued conversation.
I was like, we need like, can we do this a couple more months? It was like a 6-hour cultural competency training, and it was amazing, but it just wasn't. It was great for it was targeted and it was specific, but we didn't talk about race relations. We didn't talk about, you know, there were a lot of people left wanting to have more conversation, which I think that is what great resources do. It pushes us to want to learn more about the subject and grow and evolve. And but yeah, it didn't answer the question, you know.
Yeah, and so maybe in that space, this particular number 5, there's not enough time or, you know, enough space for that much vulnerability, and maybe because it's a work thing also, it, you know, maybe there's additional things that you want to do. I don't know, at the college, you know, I know that there have been conversations and attempts at making sure this is at the forefront of everyone's mind as you're thinking about policies and how students are faring. I imagine that in that space too, there's not enough time to really address something like this. You know, when you're talking about policies, classes, whatever. So I don't know if anyone wants to kind of talk about that experience in a workspace, but it's rough. You're on TV.
I don't know about an experience in a workplace. I was going to go about an experience that we had here last week, and it made me laugh, and that was when I was talking about myself. And you,
okay.
You and Bill called me out. I was super embarrassed, and when I think of the defensiveness, and then Bill pulled up the what was the book?
Mediocre.
Mediocre white guy. And then he goes, here's the book. And I was super embarrassed, but I also thought, because, you know, I'd read this chapter already, and I thought, yep, that's exactly, I need to, but it was funny, you know, so that was a different sort of environment, because I feel safe to sort of screw up here in front of whoever ends up watching, I guess.
Just pretend it's just us, Rich. Don't worry about it.
That's what I'm saying. It feels like it's just us. I think too, I think just the stop and ask yourself why. And I've had the feelings, and I think I talked about this before, of why do I feel like this? And when it comes down to racist attitudes and thought processes, if you don't stop and ask yourself why, that's the part where I'm thinking, I got to get better at that. And I, yeah, it just is.
But it is practice. It does take practice. I'm not, you know, I don't know if anyone is 1,000% comfortable having these conversations, even when you feel like you're in a safe space. And I mean, I've had conversations about being in BIPOC only spaces, and those spaces do feel safe for the most part. I've been in spaces recently where that wasn't the case, where I thought I wasn't in that. I said this last week, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, just like she did, this is not a safe space for me. I can't. Something happened, or maybe one of us or all of us have different ideas about what this space was supposed to be, and then we're getting defensive, and we don't even realize why. Because wait, what's happening here? This is supposed to be the safest space that I could find. So it goes. I mean, it's across the board. I feel like even when you feel like you're in that in a place where you could be vulnerable and learn from each other and be safe, that sometimes that defensiveness, because of our egos, if I say something wrong or I'm stepping too far to one side or the other, I can still, you know, offend someone and then feel like, but I have a right to say this. This is the safe space that I created. It goes both ways. I don't know. Nobody wants to talk about work, I guess. Okay.
Well, I'll share this.
Really?
Oh, so when we were having this race seminar, one of the program managers, there have been conversations with, I would say 95%, even 99%. Oh, it was the best ever. But there was 1 or 2% that it wasn't the best ever, and that it felt very, what do you mean? I didn't have slaves, but when that conversation, when people were offended, when the conversation was kind of unpacked, it came down to, it can't be that this is the only, Black Lives Matter. It wasn't, a thing of, I really hate Black people and, they're lot. It was, I want to matter. I don't want, and when you say that this life matters, and I know we're not talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm just using that as an example to say that sometimes people are defensive because they are, this is my field. There's pain there. It's ego, and it's also pain. If I start, unpacking who I am, I'm going to see some things in myself I don't like, and I need to protect myself from pain. And I think that's the human condition. Nobody wants to be in pain or feel rejected or feel abandoned and feel dumb. So I think it's that whole, let me put all these boxes up of offense because I don't want to deal, with the pain. And that's just I'm protecting the innocent. I just can't share all the information. But,
I get it.
Environment, that's what the situation was. It wasn't an issue of there was a racist person or a racist statement. It was a human person who was in pain and saw this whole group of people being, honored, highlighted. And then it was, well, what about me? Like, I have issues. I was born in poverty. I didn't get these, this kind of attention. And that was born out of pain. And I think sometimes that's what that defensiveness is about.
That's
You're
true.
a much nicer
That's a good
person
point.
than I am.
That was a very. I'm gonna put up number 7.
That's not much of a statement, but yeah, I like how you framed that.
Yeah.
I'm glad
Thank
this kind of, we don't have to go into detail about this because we kind of already talked about this. If you're white, watch how many times you say I and me, and that's kind of that space, right, where you're supposed to be learning. And maybe you feel like it's overwhelming because it's not about you. You're not the center. You're not at the center of that conversation. And it could be pain, maybe there's fear or whatever it is. And then if you're in a space where you're supposed to be learning, maybe it's also really uncomfortable to be having all those feelings in front of other people. And you don't want people to know that you're fearful or you're going to ask the wrong question or say the wrong thing.
But I'm a white guy. It's always supposed to be about me, isn't it? It's not?
Things haven't changed that much, Bill. It's still about
disappointing. You. Well, I mean, honestly, we're sort of used to we're sort of used to it being about us, right? So the change from the status quo makes us feel upset. Like, oh, I want this to be about me.
Yeah.
But it ain't. It's not about us. I mean, it can be. If you the whole, that's literally the whole point of this, right? If it's about us, we've missed the mark. No matter how bad we want to be one of the good white people, right? Which we all do. Let's just say it. It's not about us.
The other thing that Kanuli that you mentioned was also when you go through a training like that, or you have an experience, or maybe it's a webinar or a meeting, when those things come up, and then someone is brave enough to say, "Okay, but what about me? Like, I'm feeling this thing." But then, like you said, then we're unpacking that, and then this comes to mind, right? because I have felt forced into conversations where it's like, now I have to explain to you why. Who is forced to unpack? Who is forced to explain? And it doesn't, maybe, I don't know if you guys saw the whole, was it The View where Sharon Osbourne like totally lost it? And
The talk,
not so the talk. So it's that whole like forcing on not live TV, but still forcing everyone around you to explain all the things to your at your pleasure, to your satisfaction. I don't know. Anyone want to comment on this one? This one's tough.
I do. If I this one makes me think, because I think often if you're putting together a Black History Month schedule, and I'm not just talking about where I work now, but I'm looking at my both where I work now and my career in the Navy, and that continuously, you may have in the Navy an equal opportunity officer. It's always somebody of color. It's going to always be somebody, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but then when it comes to scheduling the events, then that's the person you grab, is the person of color, to say, it's Black History Month. Can you put together a schedule of talks? And then the white people will sit back and just sort of watch and empathize, but not be involved. And I think, and that's what I'm saying. I can't say there's right or wrong, but I do think sometimes, why am I just not speaking up? And we can, there's times where I've been in a room with, other officers or other peers or colleagues, and a conversation about race takes place. And, there's a person of color in the room as part of the conversation. And then that somebody will want to reinforce and then bring the person of color into the conversation and almost say, right? Am I right? Am I right? And then it turns, to where I'm not sure exactly what you're expecting the person of color in the group having the discussion to say, but I feel uncomfortable, but I'm not speaking up because I'm thinking, it's not my place. I think what I've been trying to do often now is maybe speak up when it's appropriate, and lead my own conversations, hoping that I go down and learn something. I don't know exactly here, but.
And if I could insert this, sometimes it's just not appropriate to speak up. And I appreciate what you said. I'll just call you Dr. Bill. I appreciate what you said about, the guilt factor, like, don't touch my kid's hair is on the inside, but you're like, I don't want to, create conflict. And so there are times where you have to take a stand, but sometimes the best thing to do is wait. And then when you have a private moment and you can process what happened, you can take someone aside and then educate, as opposed to confront it. And then you don't have an ally. Then you can't teach, and you can't come back and say, hey, you shared something. And I just, I just want to offer some thoughts about what you shared, because sometimes it may be your fight, but it might not be your fight right then. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, what is going to be the most effective response? My ire, my anger, my letting you know that I'm woke and you're not. Right.
Slap in the hand.
That's right.
I want to slap hands, though. I'm telling you.
For sure. What I've done, because I think this is what people should do, is I have a lot of people in my life who are, they're white, just not BIPOC, that I know that they just don't have the verbiage, they don't have the education about what racism looks like, but their heart is right. They just don't know how to say things. They don't know, they're afraid to ask questions, and then it erupts. And so I try to be an ally, and they'll ask me questions sometimes that I'm thinking, I'm so glad I don't have other Black people around listening to this question. Not a great question, but I want them to evolve because they're important to me. They're people in my life, and I know their heart is in the right place. So I said all of that to say it's important to find allies, and that's why I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's important to find allies that you can say, hey, somebody said this comment. Is this appropriate? Should I have said this, or how could I have handled that? And then you just practice it until you become more familiar, more comfortable with, gentle confrontation.
I'm not good at gentle confrontation. You can ask anybody in my family. I have a question about that, and this is a little off topic, but I'm going to indulge myself anyway because we're kind of talking about it. You said maybe take that person aside and have a conversation with them later.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like don't touch my kid's hair. Like I feel that defensive parental sort of like, I don't want you doing that because it's offensive. But I also feel like I want my kids to see that I stand up for them.
Yes.
Right. So and if I let them get their hands all up in their hair and then I have that private conversation later, it doesn't allow my kids the opportunity to see their dad.
Agreed.
Being the dad who will fight for them. So any ideas on how I can reconcile those things? Because my natural instinct is just I want to slap some hands.
Yeah.
So tell me, how do I fix that?
Yes. No, I think there are some things you have to address right away. And I think, like you said, you want your children to know you protect them. But in other cases, and I was really speaking to what you were sharing earlier, like how do I share? How do I, should I wait? And sometimes, the pressure is on, I'm supposed to be anti-racist. I should share something now. And I'm saying sometimes, let me give you an example. So there was a kid, my son's playmate. So he's riding his bike around and he said, "What's up, N-word," to my son. I had to pray to Jesus. I felt Jesus leaving me. I saw myself getting in the car. I knew his parents and I was about to handle it, but I knew I need to wait for a moment. And do you know what happened? The next day, that kid who had never been to my house came to my house, took his shoes off, sat in my couch, and I had an opportunity to talk with him. So that's what I meant is there are times and when I heard that, I said, "What did he say?" And my son, who had never heard that language, said, "I think he said, 'What's up, neighbor?'" And I couldn't tell my son, "Nah, that's not what he said." He's pure, he didn't know. So there are times when, and then when something happened later, same similar situation, I handled it then and there because my son was aware what was happening. So you just have to know when to bide your time. When is it prudent? Is it most effective for me to share this now? Is it most effective for my kid? Is it most effective for me? Or do I just want to blow up on somebody today?
I sure do. I think for me, I just got to know that I'm biding my time for the right reasons. Like, this is calculated. I'm doing this because I'm in control, not because I'm a huge chicken and I don't want to offend the white people. So that's my problem. And I've been on the wrong side of that too many times. So I've got to, get the guts to step up and do it when it's the right time. And probably not in such an angry way as I'm feeling, so that I turn them off. I think you make some really good points, and you're absolutely right. Waiting for the teachable moment would be much better. I'm not a patient person. Honestly, I'm just not. And especially when it comes to my kids, I'm taking on the angry white dad persona, and I just, I don't feel very apologetic about it most of the time, but in the bigger scheme of things about educating people, I can see that there are times when taking a breath and counting to 10 or 1,000 or whatever it takes to calm down would be nice.
I think it makes a big difference too, though, Bill, like what you're saying about what's in the moment. Like Cornelia, you're saying there's a time and a place, but there are things where you're talking about the safety of the person that you're in charge of. And it could be your kid, or it could be a wife, or another spouse, or other relative, where in that space, you're the only one that can really say that thing. You're the only one that can speak up. And that's different than this idea that when white people have questions or are confused, that you're forcing someone to come into the conversation. Explain this to me. It's like someone saying to your kid, explain to me why I can't touch your hair. And that's different than you stepping in and saying, get the hell away from that kid, don't touch their hair.
Don't touch. Right.
I think force that's in that sentence is probably the biggest difference. Richard, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think the thing that embarrasses me the most throughout my life is being confronted with something that I knew was blatantly racist. Somebody saying something out loud, and then not having the courage to really do something about it. Sort of goes back to what Bill was saying at the time. You didn't want the conflict, let's avoid the conflict, that kind of thing. At 10, 15 years ago, my awareness of what was racist is very different than what's happened over the past few years, and trying to understand, these things are racist, and starting to get, and then suddenly I'm confronted, I see it almost, when all the time, racist things happening, and I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, all these things that happen in life, whether it's, people getting, fired or laid off that are people of color. And I think back to those moments, and I'm like, where I just thought they were just angry. That person, that's it. That's why they got fired. But now I think back on the situation, and I'm like, well, they got fired because they were Black, or they got fired because they were, they were an angry female. And so I think of these things, and I'm bothered by my inaction then, and my lack of awareness. And then now my awareness is increasing, and I'm like, do I react all the time? And I think so. I think so in trying to speak up. But I've sat in meetings with faculty and staff and heard things, and I've heard, faculty say things and print things. And I'm just always thinking, is this my time? Is this my time to speak up? Or am I going to complicate issues? And but it is the truth of where we're living now, and the more awareness that I have. I guess what I'm saying is now I'm dealing with it, and really feel like I've got to start opening my mouth more.
It's beautiful.
There's also a lot of privilege in your position. So there's also the idea that what can we do to bring awareness to these things and educate people and train people and keep the conversation going. And we're not going to do like a 1 day, 6 hour thing where then people have a lot of questions after, right? You want to make sure that conversation keeps going. Even, doing something like this where like the four of us are kind of putting ourselves out there just for each other here. the idea that if there isn't a space like this, that's kind of a mixed, safe space, can also provide some kind of support and a space where questions can be asked in a sort of safe way, where it doesn't feel like the answer needs to come from one person or one group of people, that it's across the board. I'm gonna put this last thought up because we're at the hour mark, but I love this. She says this: racial oppression upsets us because it exists, not because we talk about it.
Yeah.
We want to talk about it. It's okay to talk about it, but like all the things we said before, it can't be the one person in the room. It can't be, that group that's always trying to we can't force people into conversation. So I don't know if anyone has any last thoughts about this specifically. I feel like maybe we're on the right path because we want to keep talking about it, and we're okay with making mistakes as long as we're learning. Keep talking about it.
I just one comment on what the author had said about talking about race, and that if you're not getting angry, if you're not getting upset, then you're probably right. And so that's sort of my thought process too. Is more and more I'm starting to realize it's there needs to be uncomfort and there needs to be anger, and I'm accepting that.
Yeah, I like this quote where she says, "We have a real problem of racial inequity and injustice in our society, and we cannot wish it away. We have to tackle this problem with real action, and we will not know what needs to be done if we're not willing to talk about it." So let's all get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it, right? If we can't even talk about it, we're never going to fix it. Like, talking is just like step 0.
Yes.
So here we are at step 0.
Encountering all those people that say it's better if we just don't talk about it. You're just upsetting everybody. Stop talking about it.
Race baiting.
The talking isn't. Yeah, exactly.
When you talk about race, you're a race baiter. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us.
I have enjoyed it. Bring me back. I'll be back, hopefully. I've enjoyed talking to you. And again, I just want to say thank you for being allies in the fight. Thank you. Thank you from a BIPOC woman. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We'll definitely have you back. We'll talk about, what chapters we can tackle with you. And next week, let me put this up. Next week, we're going to be talking about, this is the title of the chapter, Why Am I Always Being Told to Check My Privilege? I think privilege, like you were saying, it's like as soon as you say that word, I think you mentioned this, Kanuli, it's like it's a trigger for a lot of people, and it does kind of lead to all of the other things, that all the anger and defensiveness and maybe a misunderstanding of what it means when we talk about privilege. And so we'll tackle that topic next week. Thank you, everyone, for all of our people who are tuning in. I just love saying that. It makes me laugh. And we will be back next Monday. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.